My name is Christina, and what I'm about to reveal is something neither you nor I can continue to overlook. I am a 45-year-old professor specializing in religious history, residing in Boston, Massachusetts. Prior to my near death experience, I believed I had a comprehensive understanding of Christianity's historical development. However, on October 20th, 2024, I encountered Jesus himself, and he unveiled just how much of the church's true history has either been misinterpreted or intentionally disregarded. What I discovered completely upended the foundation of everything I thought I understood about the Christian faith. But before we dive in, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Even though we may be physically distant, it would be wonderful to feel a sense of connection. Also, please don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts on my near-death experience testimony in the comments. Let's engage in an open and respectful dialogue so we can learn from one another on this platform. I hope you find this enlightening. The day started as any other. I was on my way to campus to deliver a lecture on the early history of Christianity when a semi-truck lost control on the rain-slicked highway. The last thing I remember was the terrifying sound of metal scraping, the sensation of spinning, and then absolute peace. A peace unlike anything I had ever experienced before. Doctors later informed me that I had been clinically dead for exactly 7 minutes and 23 seconds. But where I went during that time, what I saw and came to understand felt as though it lasted an eternity. The clarity with which I recall every detail from that experience makes even my most vivid earthly memories seem like faded images in comparison. The transition itself was nothing like I had anticipated. There was no long tunnel of light, nor did I find myself hovering over my lifeless body. Instead, reality seemed to peel away like the pages of a book, revealing something infinitely more real beneath. The best way I can describe it is that it felt as though I was waking from a dream. Except in this case, the life I had known was the dream, and I was now awakening into ultimate truth. And then, he was there. Jesus stood before me, not as the calm and gentle figure seen in stained glass windows or traditional artwork, but as an overwhelming presence of pure love and truth. His being radiated warmth, yet his gaze carried a sorrowful depth as he observed what had become of his church. Christina, he addressed me, you have spent your life studying the history of my church. But there is so much more you need to learn, truths that have been lost, obscured, or misconstrued. Are you prepared to see? I found myself nodding, too awestruck to form words. What happened next was beyond anything I could have ever conceived, a divine revelation that would force me to reconsider everything I had ever believed about the origins of Christianity. Jesus did not merely explain the past to me, he showed me. In an instant, we were no longer where we had been. Instead, we stood as witnesses to events exactly as they had occurred. This experience was unlike anything that could be gleaned from ancient texts or archaeological findings. I wasn't just observing history, I was immersed in it, comprehending it with a depth that no scholarly research could ever provide. The first shocking truth Jesus unveiled concerned the very roots of the church itself. We found ourselves inside a modest room in Jerusalem, where the apostles had gathered in the days following the crucifixion. What I witnessed challenged everything I had been taught regarding church leadership and authority. Watch closely, Jesus instructed as he directed my attention toward Peter and the other apostles. What do you perceive? I observed, astonished, as Peter, the man traditionally recognized as the first pope, sat among his fellow disciples, engaging in discussion as an equal. While he was deeply respected and certainly influential, he was not assuming the supreme authority that history has often ascribed to him. But, I hesitantly asked, didn't you declare Peter the rock upon which you would build your church? Jesus responded with both kindness and conviction. I did speak those words to Peter, but consider how they were understood in their time. He gestured toward the scene before us, where Peter was earnestly debating matters of faith with James, John, and the others. The rock was never meant to signify the establishment of a rigid hierarchy with Peter at the helm. Rather, it referred to the strength of his faith and testimony, one of many foundational elements that would support the community of believers. This was just the beginning of the revelations that followed. The early church was not the structured institution we recognize today. Instead, it was a dynamic, diverse assembly of believers, each contributing their own gifts and insights to the growing movement. Authority was not centralized in a single individual or office, but was instead shared among many faithful leaders, working in unison to spread Christ's teachings. The scene shifted abruptly, and suddenly Jesus and I stood in the midst of ancient Rome. The contrast was striking. Whereas the gathering in Jerusalem had been modest and intimate, we were now in the heart of imperial grandeur. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense, and the bustling sounds of trade and religious rituals filled the streets. Now, Jesus said, I will show you something that will challenge everything you have been taught about how my church became what it is today. Before my eyes, one of history's most significant moments unfolded, the true story of Constantine's conversion. Not the oversimplified account often presented in Sunday schools, but the intricate and far more complex reality that Jesus now revealed to me. Pay close attention, Jesus urged, as we watched Constantine in the privacy of his chambers. What you are about to witness has been misunderstood for generations. I observed the mighty emperor, but not in the midst of a pure spiritual awakening. Instead, I saw a man strategically weighing the political advantages of adopting Christianity. The famous vision of the cross before battle was present, but Jesus allowed me to see beyond the surface, to understand how that moment was not merely divine intervention, but also deeply entangled with human ambition and the pursuit of power. But isn't this incorrect? I questioned, my voice uncertain. We've always been taught that Constantine's conversion was entirely miraculous. Jesus' response shook me to my very core. My child, did you believe I was incapable of working through human ambition to fulfill divine purposes? Constantine's transformation was both political and spiritual, a prime example of how I operate within human complexity to bring about my will. The realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. The rise of Christianity as the official faith of Rome was not merely a spiritual victory, it was a meticulously orchestrated political movement that reshaped the church's future forever. Then came what was perhaps the most startling revelation of all. Jesus transported us to the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. But what I witnessed was nothing like the orderly, purely sacred assembly I had always envisioned. Instead, I saw fervent debates, political maneuvering, and even intense arguments over foundational aspects of Christian doctrine. This is where many of the teachings you recognize today were established, Jesus explained. But observe how deeply human the process was. I watched in amazement as bishops fervently discussed Christ's divine nature, the hierarchy of the church, and the unification of Christian traditions. The shock must have been evident on my face because Jesus turned toward me, his eyes radiating boundless compassion. Does it trouble you to see human influence in the shaping of church doctrine? He inquired. Yes, I confessed. I always believed. We were taught that these decisions were solely the result of divine inspiration. Ah, Jesus said, but isn't it even more miraculous that I was able to work through human processes to safeguard my essential truths? The true miracle isn't that these men were flawless. It's that despite their human limitations, my message of love and salvation endured. Then Jesus revealed something that made me gasp. We traveled through different early Christian communities, and I witnessed beliefs and customs that would be considered heretical today. The Gnostic Christians with their intricate spiritual hierarchies and faith in secret wisdom. The Ebionites, who continued to observe Jewish traditions. The diverse house churches, each interpreting Christ's teachings in their own way. But which of them was correct? I asked. You're asking the wrong question, Jesus responded. What you see is how my followers, in their sincere quest for understanding, interpreted my teachings through their unique cultural and spiritual perspectives. Truth was making its way through human comprehension, much like light refracting through a prism. We moved forward in time, and I observed how the church gradually consolidated power in Rome. Yet again, what Jesus revealed challenged everything I had previously believed. Rome was not chosen as the center of the church solely because of Peter's martyrdom. It was also a decision influenced by practical concerns of power, reach, and imperial authority. Watch, Jesus instructed, as we observed early popes navigating both the spiritual and political landscapes. See how they wrestled with balancing divine purpose and earthly influence. I witnessed the gradual formation of the church's hierarchical structure, borrowing elements from Roman administration. I saw how customs that seem unalterable today actually developed over time. The role of bishops, the power of the papacy, and the organization of church authority, each of these emerged gradually through very human processes of decision making and adaptation. But what about papal infallibility, apostolic succession, the core principles of church authority that we've been taught? I asked. Jesus' response was both gentle and profound. These doctrines evolved over time as my followers sought to interpret and structure my teachings. The authority is genuine, but the process through which it emerged was more intricate than many realize. One of the most astonishing moments occurred when Jesus showed me how certain gospels and writings were selected for the New Testament while others were left out. We witnessed the deliberations and discussions that shaped these choices. See how they struggled? Jesus said as we watched church leaders debating which text to include. Their intentions were sincere. Their desire to preserve truth was real. But the process was far more human than many today might be willing to acknowledge. I observed, captivated, and slightly unsettled as doctrinal and practical decisions were made through a mixture of divine guidance, scholarly discourse, and at times, political pragmatism. This is perhaps the most crucial truth I want you to grasp, Jesus said, turning toward me with an intensity that made my soul tremble. The presence of human influence in my church's development does not diminish its divinity. It enhances the miracle. Despite the complexities of human nature, political challenges, and cultural shifts, through debate and even conflict, my core message of love and salvation has remained intact. More scenes unfolded before us, the development of liturgical practices, the establishment of church calendars, the institution of feast days and fasting traditions. I saw how many rituals that modern Christians take for granted actually arose from a fascinating interplay of divine inspiration and cultural adaptation. But why are you showing me all of this? I asked. Why reveal such intricate truths? Jesus' response was both challenging and beautiful. Because the time has come for my followers to recognize that faith is not about clinging to comforting illusions. True faith embraces both the divine and human dimensions of my church's history. The real miracle isn't that everything was perfect from the start. It's that through these very human processes, my truth and love have continued to transform lives. As these revelations unfolded, Jesus showed me how the church endured numerous crises and challenges. I saw times when multiple individuals laid claim to the papacy, moments when political power seemed to overshadow spiritual authority, and periods when the church appeared to stray from its mission. Observe, Jesus said as these troubling scenes played out before us, how even in the darkest moments there were always those who remained faithful to my true message of love and salvation. The institutional church may struggle, but my real church, the community of sincere believers, has never failed. One of the most profound moments arrived when Jesus revealed the true nature of early Christian worship. We materialized within various house churches scattered throughout the Roman Empire, and what I saw moved me to tears. Look closely, Jesus said, gesturing toward a modest gathering in a Roman home. Observe how their form of worship was unlike anything familiar to you today. The sight before me bore no resemblance to contemporary church services. Individuals gathered in close-knit circles, sharing meals that served as both physical sustenance and spiritual nourishment. Their prayers were not rigidly structured recitations, but rather genuine outpourings of faith and communal devotion. The astonishing reality was that the earliest Christian worship was vastly different from the organized rituals we now recognize. But when did things begin to change? I inquired. How did we transition from this to the structured practices of today? In response, Jesus led me through a journey unveiling one of the most remarkable truths yet, the slow and steady transformation of Christian worship from these intimate gatherings into formalized church services. We traveled across time, witnessing how simple communal meals gradually turned into established rituals, how impromptu prayers evolved into standardized liturgies, and how modest house churches gave way to grand basilicas. Take note, Jesus said, how every transformation had a purpose at the time. As the community expanded, organization became necessary. As persecution ended, open worship became possible. Yet, with every shift, something was gained and something else was lost. The revelations intensified as Jesus exposed the evolution of church doctrine. We observed the fervent disputes over Christ's nature during the Council of Nicaea, but I now saw them in a new light. These were not mere theological disagreements. They were earnest efforts by devoted believers striving to grasp profound truths. Look at their expressions, Jesus instructed as we watched the council members debate. See their passion, their sincerity, but also the human limitations they faced. I perceive the influence of political forces on their decisions, the way cultural context shaped their interpretations, and how personal ambitions sometimes colored their conclusions. Yet, despite all this, I also witnessed divine truth emerging, albeit filtered through human perception. But this may surprise you even more, Jesus said as the scene shifted once again. We found ourselves observing church authorities as they determined which writings would be included in Scripture and which would be excluded. The process was far more intricate and human than I had ever imagined. I watched as they deliberated over various gospels and letters, noting how some deeply spiritual texts were left out because they did not align with the developing Orthodox views. I saw how political and cultural elements influenced decisions that were assumed to be purely spiritual. Why were certain writings selected while others were discarded? I asked. The process was both divinely inspired and inherently human, Jesus explained. These leaders were sincerely seeking the truth, yet they were also shaped by their era and cultural surroundings. Their decisions were made with the best understanding available to them, led by my spirit, but constrained by their human perspective. What came next was a revelation so profound it nearly overwhelmed me. Jesus unveiled the progression of papal authority, not as a straightforward transfer of power from Peter, but as a gradual development shaped by both spiritual necessity and political influences. Pay close attention, he urged, as we observe the different stages of this unfolding history. See how the concept of papal supremacy did not emerge overnight, but rather took shape over centuries. I witnessed how early bishops of Rome incrementally gained greater influence, how shifting political landscapes reinforced their authority, and how theological justifications were crafted to uphold their growing prominence. The most startling realization was not that this authority was unfounded, but that its formation was far more intricate than the simplified accounts we often hear. Then what does this mean for church authority today? I asked, my voice unsteady. Jesus' reply was deeply insightful. Authority in my church has always been real, yet its manifestation has continually been molded by human understanding and circumstances. The true miracle is not that it was perfect from the start, but that despite human involvement, my truth has continued to guide and transform lives. As the revelations continued, Jesus brought my attention to a subject that challenged my existing beliefs, the role of women in the early church. I saw women serving as deacons, leading house churches, and playing a critical role in the expansion of Christianity. Their eventual exclusion from leadership was revealed as a human decision influenced by societal norms rather than a divine decree. This, too, is an essential part of the story that must be acknowledged, Jesus said. Notice how cultural biases and traditions shaped the course of my church's development. The insights grew increasingly astonishing. I saw how the practice of confession evolved from public acts of reconciliation to private penitential rites. I witnessed how the concept of the Eucharist underwent centuries of theological refinement. I observed how doctrines such as purgatory and indulgences emerged through a complex interplay of theological reflection and cultural context. But if all of this is true, I questioned, what does it imply for faith today? Jesus' response was both challenging and reassuring. Understanding the development of my church should not weaken faith. It should strengthen it. Recognizing how I work through human agents with all their flaws and intricacies reveals the true wonder of my enduring presence in the world. As my time with Jesus neared its conclusion, he granted me one final, profound vision. I saw the church through the ages, its struggles and victories, its moments of divine inspiration and human shortcomings. Yet through it all, one undeniable truth stood out: the continuous thread of God's love woven throughout history. This is the greatest truth of all, Jesus declared. My church has never been flawless because it is composed of imperfect people. Yet, through all of its human elements, its conflicts, its debates, and even its errors, my message of love and salvation has persisted. That is the true miracle. As the vision began to fade, I felt myself being drawn back into my physical body. But before I awoke, Jesus had one final message for me. Share what you have seen, Christina. Let them know that understanding the human aspects of my church's history does not diminish its divine nature. It reveals the real miracle of how I work through humanity in all its complexity. I gasped as I regained consciousness in the hospital room, the weight of these revelations burning within me. The doctors deemed my survival a miracle, but the true wonder was what Jesus had revealed about the authentic history of his church. Since that day, I have carried these revelations with me, realizing that they do not weaken faith, but instead deepen it. The astonishing truth about the early church is not that it was without flaw. It is that despite its human dimensions, God's truth and love have continuously shaped lives. The most profound takeaway from my experience is this: the church's human journey makes its divine mission all the more miraculous. Grasping how God operates through human beings, with all their limitations, hardships, and complexity, teaches us that faith is not about clinging to comforting illusions, but about embracing the intricate, beautiful reality of how God moves in our world. I share this testimony not to challenge belief, but to strengthen it. The truth Jesus unveiled to me demonstrates that God's work is far more wondrous than we often imagine, not because it is without imperfection, but because it encompasses both divine guidance and human struggles. Before you depart, I want to stress that everything Jesus revealed aligns with historical evidence while offering a deeper spiritual perspective on these events. He did not show me a simplified version of church history, but rather the full, intricate reality of how divine purpose has been carried out through human agency in building his church. My near-death experience is not merely a collection of historical facts. It is a testament to how God operates in the world, working through both people and institutions to fulfill his divine plan. And that is the most vital truth of all.